Brian Riedl, welcome to the program. Thanks for taking the time.
Glad to be here.
Why is Donald Trump wrong when he's been going around in the last week saying that FEMA is out of money, can't do anything about the hurricane response because FEMA's given all their money away to illegal immigrants? What's wrong with that claim?
Yeah, Donald Trump is flat wrong. FEMA's disaster relief fund just received $20 billion 2 weeks ago as part of a continuing resolution, which should last until November when Congress returns. If it doesn't last till November, Congress can return sooner to pass more money. A lot of this is because Congress doesn't like to give FEMA money until it absolutely needs it after a disaster. If Congress budgeted for FEMA annually, if they budgeted for disaster relief, they would look like they're spending more money and increasing the deficit. So in order to make themselves look more fiscally responsible, they wait until after a big disaster and send the money later. This is cynical budgeting at its finest in Washington.
Can we go so far as to say that the quality of response and indeed the ability to save lives and property is compromised as a result?
FEMA has a relatively spotted track record responding to emergencies. You know, people in the United States remember Hurricane Katrina very well about 20 years ago. FEMA is not always in the strongest suit. It's not necessarily because of a lack of funding, though. FEMA is usually funded at least pretty quickly after the disaster happens. But in the United States bureaucracy, there's always going to be some mismanagement. And FEMA historically has had a lot of mismanagement, even outside of its funding challenges.
You just referred to FEMA in the budget, but what other concerns are there, if any, about Congress never seeming to pass the annual budget on time?
Congress hasn't finished the appropriations bills by the October 1st deadline in decades. The result is they wait until about 2 days before Christmas and then take all of the year's bills, merge them all together into one $2 trillion bill funding everything for the whole year, and then give members of Congress 48 hours to read on it and vote on it with no amendments. This is part of the reason government grows and it's mismanaged. Congress falls behind on budgeting, then they have to do $2 trillion at the last minute before anybody reads it.
Brian, setting aside the idiocy of Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, saying that these storms are created and directed by who knows who. But what about the hypocrisy that is on show from those members of Congress, others that you see who are saying one thing now, that they need FEMA money for their districts in Florida, for example, compared to their previous votes and their previous statements?
Yeah, there's always a lot of hypocrisy to go around. There's members of Congress who vote against disaster aid funding when it's somewhere else, particularly if it's the other party's state or district, and then demand it when it's their district or state. While we're speaking of hypocrisy, President Trump is blaming President Biden for raiding the disaster relief fund. In 2019, it was actually President Trump who tried to raid the disaster relief fund to finance his own immigration policies right during the 2019 hurricane season. So Trump is accusing Biden of doing exactly what Trump himself did as president 5 years ago.
Is there anything else you want to get off your chest as a budget expert? The kind of things that are being said, particularly by the campaigns about what they're going to do or the impact that it's going to have on the economy and so on. Are there anything that's really bugging you right now?
That's bugging me. Both candidates have been extraordinarily irresponsible, proposing to add roughly $7 trillion in deficits over the next decade, on top of $22 trillion in baseline deficits already projected into the system. That means we're looking at about $30 trillion in added red ink over the decade, whether it's Trump or Harris getting elected president. Additionally, while both candidates continue to run on bringing down prices and bringing down inflation, we continue to see proposals for tariffs, runaway spending, and other policies that are only going to raise prices further. It seems like the Santa Claus pandering of the Trump and Harris campaign is really designed to make deficits and inflation even worse no matter if they promise the other way. It really is silly season and pandering season in Washington.
Now, Brian, a few months back, there were concerns that Kamala Harris is running a vibes-based campaign with not a lot of policy. But since then, she has released an 82-page booklet with her economic plan. Is that enough detail now, in your view, to reasonably evaluate her policies? And how does her level of policy detail compare to Donald Trump's, in your view?
Harris has added more policy. She's filled in details, particularly in proposals like her price gouging idea that originally sounded like full-on price controls. The detail is appreciated. And at this point, I think she's reached a typical level of detail from presidential campaigns. Of course, Trump offers no detail at all. Trump proposals come and go with random asides and random speeches. No one really knows if he means it, if he's serious, if he's backing it up. The Trump campaign is entirely based on vibes. Harris has more detail. That being said, both candidates are still proposing generally irresponsible platforms that are going to deepen the red ink.
Brian Riedl, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Planet America.
Thank you very much.